brilliant.
This is so
Because
fun.
actually, I think the whole thing about the way the gods comes out is brilliant. I thought the whole film was brilliant.
Thank you so much.
I thought it was the best adaptation of Greek.
I'll pause you there because this is all going to be great.
Yeah,
Come on, save it. This is all gold for us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Rest is History special. I am Tom Holland, and I have with me the real Tom Holland.
Not the real Tom Holland,
Yes,
just
the real
the
Tom
other
Holland.
Tom Holland.
I know my place. I know my place. And were I the kind of person who regularly Googled himself, I mean, you would have destroyed my ability to do that.
I'm
but since
sorry,
I'm not,
Tom.
well, I don't Google myself, so it's absolutely fine.
Well, that's a very healthy thing to do.
Yes. So you are here to talk about the Odyssey,
Yes.
the incredible new film directed by Christopher Nolan, in which you play Telemachus,
Thank you.
son of Odysseus. And you said of the script of this film that it was the best script you had ever read.
Mm-hmm.
And what was it that made you say that?
I think it was the scope and scale of the story. You know, for anyone that's familiar with the Odyssey, you know, the kind of ancient text, turning it into a film feels like you'd have to make 5 films. You know, it's such a vast piece of work. But Chris's ability to tell that story in 130 pages while maintaining the heart and the soul of what makes the story so exciting, so emotional, so relevant today, I think is just such a feat. And for me, you know, it's the first time I'd ever read a Chris Nolan story or a script. And
But you were a fan of the other films.
oh, of course I was. Yeah, absolutely.
So all those kind of tricks with time and with multiple narratives and the idea of people wanting to come home. I mean, in a way, the Odyssey, it features all of those themes. So it's
Yeah.
a kind of perfect match, really, isn't it?
It does really lend itself to Chris's sensibility as a filmmaker. You know, Homer definitely is not telling a story in a linear way. It is jumping forwards and backwards in time.
And it begins with Telemachus. the
It does,
character
yeah.
That you play. I mean, just wondering, before you read the script, how familiar were with the story? You kind of read about it as a child, that kind of thing?
I mean, I'd say familiar as that I knew that he faced the Cyclops, and I
Yeah.
kind of knew that the sirens were mermaids that would sing a song somehow. And yeah, I knew that I didn't know how to pronounce Lystragonians until I made the film. But yeah, I had a very, very general knowledge. I knew about the suitors. I knew about the stringing of the bow and the challenge that Penelope sets for all of the suitors. But it wasn't until I read the script and then in turn read the poem that I really kind of immersed myself in the text.
Because as you say, I mean, it's literally epic
Yeah.
in scale. And I thought what was stunning about the way that the film is organized is you have all the drama of your character and Penelope, played by Anne Hathaway, and the suitors and all of that. And the Trojan War plays a crucial role as well, and the Trojan horse. And it's all done within less than 3 hours. And that is the kind of thing that Hollywood does. So Hollywood is very good at working on a massive scale, as you know, because you've been in many films like that. But there is a hint of kind of more recent Hollywood epics, aren't there? Particularly superhero films, did you think?
Yeah, I think that, you know, epic is not exclusive to swords and sandals and ancient text. You know, I think at the end of the day, what I love about Chris is Chris lives to entertain. And this movie is challenging. It has topical themes, and I think it's very relevant in today's society. But his main focus is not to educate, it's to entertain. And I think that doing that on an epic scale, he probably is the best at doing that. And I really hope that audiences see this movie and escape the world. They go on this adventure. Shooting it in IMAX, IMAX is a very different beast. You know, I would say that there's a huge difference between acting on stage to acting on screen. And then there's an even bigger difference between acting on screen and acting on IMAX.
Oh, what's the
because
difference?
you just can't hide anything in IMAX. It's so, the resolution is so good, and there's no secrets, there's nowhere to hide. It really promotes a sort of more subtle version of performance because it can very quickly become too much. So for me, I really enjoyed trying to find that biting point of where you were working perfectly with the camera.
Yeah. I mean, it seemed to me that it is really true to the spirit of Homer. You have all the adventures, as I said. You've got all the kind of the complexity of the time and the narrative and everything like that. And it looks beautiful. But there are kind of hints of some of Christopher Nolan's earlier films in the looks. But I was thinking about your character. So Telemachus is 20 years old. He's kind of young man. His father has never been there. So he's grown up surrounded by these older men who are seeking the hand of his mother. And it's quite tough for him. And it's like, that is a very ancient Greek situation, but it's also the kind of thing that you might recognize from a kind of high school movie in which our hero is being menaced by the jocks. And there's quite a lot of that. You know, you get kind of dumped on your back by the guy who you know, because you know the logic of the film. And it's not just Homeric, it's also from, you know, the grammar of high school movies and even superhero movies. That our hero is going to come good and you are ultimately going to become the hero. And do you think that was something that you were aware of as you were playing that role, that there were echoes perhaps of that kind of logic as well as of Homer?
Yeah, I mean, so much of what is in Homer's work has influenced storytelling in every way. You know, I think that, you know, there's probably not a big movie that comes out that on an epic scale that has not got some sort of, or does not owe some sort of respect
Epic's Coming Home.
Yeah, exactly. But then something I'd love to touch on that you brought up, and this is only my interpretation, I haven't actually spoken to Chris about this. To me, the way I see the film is that Telemachus and Penelope represent the reality of the story. And Odysseus' side of the story, Matt's side of the story, represents the myth. And this humongous game of telephone that has been played with this text, you know, it wasn't written down for hundreds of years. There was a dark period in ancient Greece where no one would write anything down, so they would sing the song. So to me, what I love about the creative choices that Chris has made on that side of the story is that he's kind of pushed the boundaries of what might be deemed historically accurate or reality, because that is the myth.
And I think that again is true to what Homer is doing in the Odyssey. Because Odysseus, you know, his first adventure, he sacks a city, and that's the kind of thing that people did. And then he moves on to the Cyclops story, which the Greeks said, well, that is set in Sicily. So even though it involves a giant with one eye, which is obviously mad, the Greeks said, well, it happened in this particular place. And then he starts going to really strange places that are clearly outside the order of the mortal, and he ends up in the land of the dead. Matt Damon is off meeting these weird things, and they get weirder and weirder and weirder as it goes on. I think that's why the film works brilliantly as an adaptation of Homer. And it opens, there's kind of slogan, isn't there, at the beginning, a time of apparent magic. And so that's something, again, that is running throughout the film. You're never quite sure how real what you're seeing is. And I guess an obvious question for anyone who is adapting Homer is, what do you do about the gods? Because in Homer's poems, the gods are not just real, but very, very vivid.
I know when I read the script for the first time, I was completely floored by the kind of big surprise. Again, it goes back to that conversation we just had about Matt's side represents the myth, and you're never quite sure on what is reality and what is someone recounting a story and then another person recounting a story and slightly changing a detail, and all of a sudden, 10 stories down the line, it was a cyclops that they were fighting in a cave, rather than a giant dude who wore an eye patch. You know, is kind of how I imagined that story grew.
But there's also a sense in which perhaps you're not supposed to decide one way or the other. So
I think that is
small example involving you at the beginning. That you have this guy called Mentor, who in the poem is Athena in disguise. And in the film, he looks like Erling Haaland. He's this kind of absolute unit, isn't he?
He's a big dude, Ryan,
And he's teaching you to fight.
He's teaching me to fight, and he's kind of trying to, in some way, fill the shoes that are missing of my dad. You know, I have Eumaeus and I have Mentor, who are sort of these father figures for me. But I've heard these stories, this myth, the legend of Odysseus, and everything about my life is about waiting to meet him.
And it's not clear whether the Mentor that you are fighting in that scene, because you say, I think something like you have the eyes of Athena or something said like that. And then things happen which make you doubt whether Mentor is a god or whatever. The ambiguity is preserved, and it's brilliantly subtly done, I thought.
Thank you. Well, I can't take credit for that. That's Chris's work.
I mean, but you play him you don't know whether this person is a god or not. And so
No.
there's a kind of ambivalence in your acting with him.
The way I kind of justified it was a sort of juvenile naivety. And you know, sometimes when you're a kid, you look up at your dad and you go, wow, my dad is invincible. My
Yeah.
dad can do anything.
Yeah.
And then you grow up and you go, oh, well, it's actually just a human being. Like, I can't do everything, you know? And I found when I was, working on those scenes, there's also, Athena visits Telemachus a few times before he leaves to go and find Menelaus. And she comes to him in the form as a beggar. She comes to him in the form of mentor. And in those scenes, I was trying to find this kind of like wishful hopefulness that only young kids
you did.
have.
Yeah.
And trying to see gods in people where they might not be gods, or read into things where there might not be something to read into.
And I thought also what was moving was you could see the hero that Telemachus is going to become in due course, but also you could see the little boy, particularly when you are with Penelope, your mother, played by Anne Hathaway. And what a performance from her. Because
she's
she
incredible
is
in the film.
ferocious.
So good.
And it's so important that you believe that Odysseus is in love with Penelope and wants to come back, because that's the great driver of the plot. And watching Anne Hathaway's performance, you could completely believe that this is a woman worth travelling across the 7 seas to get back to.
It's a testament to Chris's work as a writer, but also a testament to her as an actor. You know, she was so powerful on set, and I think she really portrayed a version of Penelope that we've never seen before. You know, I've been lucky enough to be sat with Anne for the last few days listening to her talk about Penelope, and you know, people always describe her as the perfect example of modesty and patience and all these sorts of
Slightly passive
qualities. But really what Anne has discovered is that she's displaying that to the people because if she doesn't, she will lose the war and the suitors will take over. She's really putting up this front to try and protect her son, to protect Ithaca, and hopefully to wait for Odysseus to come home. And something that I love that Anne developed with Ellen, our amazing costume designer, is that she's always wearing really rich ruby tone clothes.
That amazing necklace she's got.
She's got a beautiful necklace. She always has her hair really done. And it is to tell the audience that she still believes that today could be the day that he comes home.
But also it's conveying her power as a queen, I guess, as well.
Yeah, and it's displaying that like the resilience that Odysseus shows throughout the film to make it home is the same as the resilience that she shows at home, keeping those suitors at bay, protecting her son and waiting for her husband. Like the way we've been describing it is it's like having a 20-year home invasion of these awful men just destroying your home,
eating all your food, drinking all your drink. Yeah, terrible. So you are, you know, you're very put upon by the suitors, these jocks who are kind of kicking sand in your face, as it were, and so you go off to mainland Greece to meet with Menelaus, the brother of Agamemnon, whose wife Helen had been abducted by the Trojans, and this is basically what the Trojan War is for. And Menelaus has now come back to his native city of Sparta with Helen. And Menelaus is normally played as a bit of a wimp. I mean, he's the kind of the cuckold, the guy who's been humiliated by Paris stealing his wife. I thought that he was almost the most terrifying figure in the film, almost more terrifying than the Cyclops. And the Cyclops is pretty terrifying because he was in The Walking Dead, wasn't he?
Yes, of course, yeah.
And yeah, I mean, he plays Menelaus as a very, very frightening man. How did that feel, acting opposite him?
I've known John since I was 17 years old, and we are very good friends. And I was so delighted that we got to share that day together because he's an amazing actor.
Yeah.
And I think what he's showing in that scene is the consequence of war and what it does to a man. I think what we see in that scene might be a scary version of a person, but I think what he's going for is someone that is scared and ashamed of what they've done. And
he is with Helen, and there are all kinds of nuances and complexities that we won't go into, which are, I mean, overwhelming when it hits you as a viewer. And there is. So I mentioned that he was in this great zombie series, and there is a hint of a kind of zombie apocalypse that is brewing throughout
Yes.
the film. This mention of the sea peoples who are based on history. There were people called the sea peoples who just ended up destroying the great palaces of Mycenae and Pylos and so on, and go on to attack Egypt and Syria. But in the film, they're kind of very eerie and mysterious, aren't they? Like a kind of threat that is growing and growing over the course of the film. Did that? What was the kind of thinking behind that? Did you discuss that?
It is a really, really interesting idea because it isn't something that's necessarily explored in the poem, but this film is incredibly topical and relevant, and that particular plot point is super relevant, and I think it's something that, you know, people will be really affected by when they see it. Are you talking to Chris?
No, in my dreams.
I wish you were, because you guys would have an amazing conversation. And
well, put in a word for me.
It's a really, really powerful moment in the movie, and it almost kind of shows how the Odyssey has grown over time, because they didn't have the means to communicate over borders or seas. You know, everything was word of mouth, and every story changes with every time it's told. And this myth of the people of the sea is such an amazing vehicle for tension throughout the film.
Yeah, I mean, it is brilliant because the sea peoples end up destroying the world of Homer, and there is a sense of action to come even when this film ends. So, Tom Holland, thank you so much for that. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and do go and see The Odyssey. It's tremendous.